And welcome to this month's Farmington Hills Citizen Corps Council for Emergency Preparedness cable show. Today's topic is business disaster preparedness. I'm Fanchen Stinger, and I will be your host for today's program. So thank you once again for joining us. We have a lot of great information to share with you today. The mission, of course, of the Citizen Corps Council is to support and enhance the efforts of the local public safety organizations in helping them ensure that residents like yourselves and business owners in our community have the information, the education, and also the skills that are necessary to prepare yourselves, your family, your homes, and your businesses in the event of a local emergency in our community. With me today is Ara Tapuzian. He is the president of the Farmington Hills Chamber of Commerce. Also, we have Bill Crabtree. Bill is the senior manager, Administrative Services with Daimler Chrysler Services North America. Ara and Bill, thank you both so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about a lot of different things today. There's so much to think about when you think about emergency preparedness, and especially in light of what has happened in the last few years, this is really on the forefront of everyone's mind. And when we're talking about businesses today, we are not only talking about the traditional business, but this can also apply to families as well. So Ara, I'm going to start with you. When it comes to local business people, what do we need to be thinking about as business people and as customers when it comes to emergency preparedness?
Well, Fanchen, I think probably the most important thing is to have a plan. And a lot of businesses feel, and our residents feel as well, it won't happen to me.
Exactly.
And you have to have a plan in place because you never know what emergency or God forbid a disaster will come about. So a plan will save you in the long run.
One of the things I think about when you say that is the blackout last fall. When that happened, one of the main problems was that people were not prepared. You had people lining up for ice, stores were running out of water. So like you said, having a plan is definitely key. Can you give us some concrete examples of the types of plans, the types of things we need to be thinking about?
Well, you touched on one, which is the blackout of last year, 2003. And one of the main problems there, and Bill's got some excellent examples about how they survived that problem, is that communication, number one, is key. You need to, as a business, have a plan as far as how to get a hold of your employees, how everybody can stay in touch. That was one of the major problems. Also, just backup of your files, important data. If you've had things on your hard drive that you can't have any access to because there's a blackout and there's no power, what other sort of hard materials do you have maybe kept off site?
Okay.
So
and I imagine a generator would be key, especially for businesses. I know we had one at Fox 2. And Bill, Daimler Chrysler, Ara mentioned that you guys had a plan in place, or you have things in place in case of emergencies like this. For the blackout, what did Daimler Chrysler do?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, you have to be prepared. So we had plans in place to handle most emergencies. We have an incident management team, a group of employees that are trained to handle this sort of thing. When this absolutely happened at that time, the first thing we did was we created an 800 number that employees could call to find an update as to the emergency. The other thing, we sent out information to our employees that they are to listen to the radios, local radios, for updates on this disaster. What had happened, if you recall, there was traffic
oh my gosh,
problems.
It was horrible.
Yes, absolutely.
People couldn't get home. People couldn't even call family members unless they had a cell phone. Then the cell phone lines were jammed. So
there was water crisis. You didn't have water, so we had bottled water available to our employees. We also have we have a list of critical employees that need to be on site during emergencies. They already know who they are. They know what they need to do. Such as our cash management, which is one of our important departments, but also our security people and building.
That's amazing. I think what you just brought up is key, is having a plan in place so that people know where they need to be and what they need to be doing, so an emergency happens, they move into action immediately. And when you do have a plan like that, that I think creates a sense of calm for everyone, because you kind of go into, emergency mode. So, I know what I need to be doing. I know one of the automakers, I'm not sure which one, but I know one of the automakers had a plan in place so as every executive that was in the air at that time that plane was brought down immediately. So they knew
Right.
where every executive was, every second, every minute. I'm sure Daimler Chrysler had the
Absolutely.
very same plan
Yep.
in place. What in terms of preparedness, is there anything else that the Chamber is recommending that business owners in Farmington Hills do
Sure.
that maybe they haven't thought about yet?
Well, I think the main thing, Fanch, is they have a checklist
Okay.
of a lot of things.
Okay.
And you've got to look at maybe 3 different areas. You need to look at how to protect the interior of your business, the outside of your business, and actually customers too, for the retail businesses that have customers that come in when there's a disaster. I mean, the blackout was late in the afternoon, so
Right.
many of these businesses had customers in there. How do you handle them? First aid kits
Okay.
are essential to have. One of the biggest questions we get is, well, you're asking us to really prepare. It's going to cost a lot of money. I don't think there's that kind of a great cost.
It could cost
for
you
it.
more if you're not prepared.
That's right. That's right.
If you're
one of
having
the-
to replace things or.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems during last year was the fact that a lot of nonprofits in the summertime have their outdoor events.
That's right.
And this is their only fundraiser that they have during the course of the year. And that blackout hurt a lot of people, obviously because of food and perishables and so forth. But there's more to the preparedness that people really understand. It's not maybe a natural disaster.
Okay.
God forbid you have a CEO or an employee
Exactly.
pass away
Exactly.
suddenly. So what's in place to sort of step in and take that person's job, to inform employees and so forth. So a checklist
Okay.
is essential. Every business is a little bit different,
That's
and
true.
they need to run that through with the employees from time and time again.
Okay. A lot of business owners may be watching right now and saying to themselves, okay, how do I get started? Okay, you mentioned a checklist.
Yes.
At Daimler Chrysler, I'm sure you guys had to sit down at some point and come up with your plan from nothing. How would you apply what you've done at Daimler Chrysler maybe to other business owners, small or large, in the area? How do they sit down and actually come up with a plan?
Well, absolutely. You have to have the key different departments that we're a large company, so
Okay.
we're a little different than local businesses. So you need to sit down and actually understand that incidents do happen, can and do happen.
Right,
Once
right.
you understand that, like you'd mentioned,
Right.
then you can sit down and say, okay, what kind of incidents could happen? Of course, in this area, you have tornadoes, you can have floods, you can
Power
have fires.
outages, yeah.
Some of the other things that a lot of business owners don't think about is domestic violence. Employees are attacked at work. So the first thing we did was create a whole crisis management program.
Oh,
And-
okay.
And basically, we created an incident
Oh,
management
wow.
handbook, and the handbook is distributed to all of our core executives.
Okay.
They have one of these not only in their office, but they also keep one at home
Okay.
and in their car.
That's great.
Yes, a lot of times when we first did this, we forgot about having the additional copies because, and they kept them at the
Yeah.
office.
Right,
Well, what
right.
happens if you can never have access to your building again?
That's right.
You could have a small fire in your office building, but it could do structural damage, and they will condemn that building, and you will no longer have access to your records, your employee records, your vendor records, your suppliers.
Okay.
You also have billing information, accounts payable information. If something happened, you need to keep the money flow coming.
Okay.
If you recall, a few years ago with the Oklahoma bombing incident at the
Yes.
federal building,
Yes.
although it did a lot of damage to the building,
Mm-hmm.
most of the offices in there were not affected. However, the entire building was condemned. 80% of the businesses that were headquartered in that building went bankrupt because they did not have a plan and they did not have the records off-site, so they were
Okay.
stuck.
So you need to sit down, obviously, and assess your needs.
Yes.
You need to have a backup plan, having your records somewhere off-site. Is there anything else in that process?
Well, we look at it in 3 parts.
Okay.
Preparedness, preparedness, what can you do to mitigate the effects of an incident if it
Okay.
does happen, or
Okay.
keep it from happening.
Okay.
Then you have incident management.
Okay.
How do you actually handle the incident as soon as it happened or while it's happening? And then there's business resumption. What's it going to take to get your business back into operation?
Wow.
So you know, business preparedness is essentially free. You can,
Right.
other than time invested to
Right.
really look into it.
And one thing I will say too, you know, being obviously because of what I do, I'm usually on the scene when disasters or emergencies like this happen. And the people who have plans in place are the people who don't panic, because they go right into emergency mode. No
Right.
matter how bad the situation may be, it may be a horrible tragedy. If you have a plan, you know what your responsibility is, so to speak. That kind of cuts down on the level of panic. And I know Daimler Chrysler has won numerous awards. Kind of just tell us a little bit about the awards you've won because of how prepared you are.
Well, first of all, I really don't want to get into the awards because Daimler Chrysler Services awards are not the big thing about this.
But it does, I think, though, point out, number one, how effective you are at planning, so that people listening to you right now know you know what you're talking about. You've been recognized for this.
And what we want to be the benchmark company
Exactly.
for safety and security, because we are first and foremost interested in the protection and safety of our employees, our constituents, and our community.
Okay.
You know, and then after that, then the assets of the company, of course, and our reputation.
We talked a little bit about the blackout. The other one that comes to mind, obviously, is 9/11.
Yes.
Have you had to use any of your emergency training or preparedness beyond the blackout? Did you have to use it when 9/11 happened?
Well, with 9/11, it was interesting because our top-level executives were in Toronto on their for a business meeting, and of course, all the planes had been grounded. So we had to get in touch with them. We contacted them. The first thing they said was, let's send the employees home. So,
And I remember that, because I remember all the calls started coming into our station. Most of the auto makers were shutting down
Right.
and sending people
We get
home.
the same calls.
yeah, so we sent our employees home about 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And it was more, you know, the employees were not going to do any business anyways. Everybody was so concerned that
And we
they
didn't know
needed
what was
to-
happening.
they wanted to be home by
Right.
their families.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that you bring up that's important in the case of an emergency, especially for businesses. Your employees are going to be first thinking about their family and their
Right.
children. Anytime something happens at a school, anytime something happens anywhere, the first thought is my family and my children. I remember calling friends and family members and saying, okay, you need to get out of the building or whatever, because we
Right.
did not know what was happening. And when you have a situation like that, it is the first thing you think of. And I think it's great that companies are sensitive to that, because there were some companies that did not send their employees home.
Right.
They forced employees to stay. And had the situation been worse, that could have posed a problem. So like you said, remember, we're all human here.
Well, things have changed too a lot since 9/11.
Yes, they
Just
have.
our awareness, you know, we're more aware of what's going on, and it's unlikely that something like that would happen again, where businesses are saying, you need to sit at your desk and don't even use the telephone.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any other things that you would communicate to business listeners in terms of the human aspect, the physical aspect, and maintaining continuity, anything like that?
You know, I think the best thing would be for businesses to have to really sit down and look at their type of business. Everybody is so different. It's hard to give some actual concrete examples of what they should do besides the obvious. But there are websites out there. The Small Business Administration have websites. FEMA does. The Red Cross does. They've all got excellent websites to give a really sort of a helping hand.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, one of the best things to probably do is to give somebody like Daimler Chrysler a call. We're not all going to have the answers, and the best thing to do is to talk to your fellow business neighbor. You know, in times of disaster, everybody
Right.
does pull together, because the goal we all have is the same: is obviously to stay alive,
Right.
and as far as the business community goes, is just to keep your business running. A lot of businesses closed up after the blackout last year.
Yeah, that was very sad. Very sad.
One fire will definitely do it. Bill touched on that, but I know of an incident where an organization had a fire, and say none of their files were in fireproof file drawers, or they, they lost everything.
Wow.
And how do you recover from that?
A lot of times you can't.
No.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about what happened during 9/11? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Okay.
no. Just that it did raise a lot of awareness, and I think the businesses are interested in this. I would say that local businesses probably need to educate their employees that this can happen.
It's a reality now.
Yeah.
Exactly. What would you do in case of a fire?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in case of a tornado? At all of our sites throughout the country, we have fire drills. We have tornado shelters within the building. I mean, tornado shelters are in the restrooms, in the stairways.
I'm thinking about our building. I don't even think I know where our tornado shelter is. I don't know if we have one.
Well,
See,
you
that's
know-
something you can take for
Yeah.
granted and not
Most-
even know.
You know,
Right.
and most businesses do fire drills, but
Yeah.
they never think of the tornadoes. And in
Yeah.
Michigan,
Exactly.
tornadoes,
Oh, yeah.
reality.
Yeah.
And they happen whenever they
They
want
just
to happen.
pop up,
Yeah.
exactly. And you know, you think emergency or disaster preparedness, and you think of these big things like a blackout or a
Right.
terrorist attack, but they can be something just like the storms we've been having, you know,
Right.
overnight, knocking
Right.
out power lines. You know, we've had schools that have been closed for days. We've had all kinds of things have happened. So you bring up a very good point. Can you explain for me, Bill, this term that we keep hearing, upstream losses, downstream losses? What does that mean?
Well, there's three things right there. Is first of all, there's a disaster or an incident that could happen to your company. And then there's upstream losses, which means what would happen if one of your major suppliers faces a disaster?
Right.
What if they go out of business because of a bombing or an explosion and you can't get critical material? What we like to do at Daimler Chrysler Services is when we issue a purchase order or a contract to one of our vendors, we'll do a site check and we'll see what their backup plans are.
Ah,
So, you know, you might have to pay a little bit extra. You know, the cheapest contract may not always be the
Right.
cheapest. So, and we have redundancies in a lot of critical areas where we'll have contracts go out to different companies.
that makes sense.
Or we'll look at a company that has sites throughout the country,
Okay.
multiple sites. And so that's a big one. Now, with downstream, now you're talking about more or less your customers.
okay.
What happens if you have a flood and a rainstorm and your customers are sitting there digging out mud during the day, you know, and you're a theater owner? You know, I don't think you're going to see a lot of business.
That's right.
How can you know, how long can you last? You know, what can you do to
Exactly.
mitigate the losses?
You know, at that point too, this just comes to mind, a business can turn toward community service. You know, a
Yes.
theater, sure, you're not going to get a lot of people in for a movie during a disaster. Well, why not open up, become a help center?
Right.
And then the next time that family thinks about, I want to go to the movies, they're going to think about that theater because that theater came to our aid in the time of an emergency.
Absolutely.
You know, you can turn it
Yes.
into,
Goes a long way.
oh yeah. And you know, and once you establish those personal contacts with your community, you're going to have customers for life,
Yes.
basically. So, was that everything on downstream?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just want to make sure. We've talked a little bit about terrorism. Obviously, you know, we don't like to dwell on things like this, but bombs and anthrax, that's a reality as well. And those are tactics that have been used, especially with the anthrax scare. A lot of businesses received letters. In terms of dealing with those types of things, same rules apply?
Well, what we do is we actually scan all of our mail now that comes in. Bomb threats are kind of a whole different situation because you can get bomb threats from disgruntled employees,
That's true.
unsatisfied customers, and 99.9% of a bomb threat is nothing more than a threat. The problem is you don't know where that 0.01% is. So what we will do when we get a bomb threat is we'll have our local managers walk the site, look for things that may look out of place, suspicious packages, boxes that weren't there earlier. And if we do find something, then we call the police and we have in the bomb. You know. But if you send employees home every single time you had a bomb threat, you would be getting bomb threats on a daily basis.
Oh, yeah. And you probably lose a lot of money, and
Yes.
your production levels will go way down.
You know, on a small business side, though, that probably is not always the case
Right.
when it comes to, let's say, the bomb threat or some sort of a terror threat. And I think the best advice that one could give in that regard is you need to be aware. You need to be aware of your surroundings. You know, the definition of terrorism is to instill terror.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're in that time in this country where we do look twice, or we look behind our backs more often than maybe we should. And I think the best way for let's say that small business, either that mama papa store or a service type of an organization, is to be aware of your surroundings, to be educated in maybe what you can do in some of these things. But you know what? Overall, life has got to go on,
Right.
and you have to live your life without fear.
Yeah. We talked about costs, and we talked about, the cost of not being prepared could, in the long run, be greater than the cost of being prepared. Is there anything else you want to touch on in terms of costs, or is that?
Well, first of all, with cost, I mean, you shouldn't even use the word cost. It should be considered an investment.
That's what I was just going to say. Yep,
and,
I agree.
You can still have fire extinguishers. You can have your employees go to CPR training, first aid training. You should become a member of MEMO, the Michigan Emergency Management Organization, which is part of FEMA. FEMA also, like Era had mentioned earlier, is a wealth of supplies. This is all things you can do free of charge.
That's great.
And there are small investments. Defibrillators, we have defibrillators at all of our sites, which go for about $2,000, but they've been known to save lives.
Oh, definitely. Okay, well, that sounds really good. We've talked a lot about business owners. Anything in terms of employees? You talked about employees getting first aid training, employees, being aware of their surroundings. Is there anything else that may be directed to employees or customers that we have not touched on?
Just the fact that they do need to be aware that this can and does happen.
Everyone needs to be on the same page, and everybody has to have the same understanding. If you're going to go in with one plan, everybody's got to understand that plan, whatever that case may be.
Well, absolutely, and every individual is responsible for their own safety, and even if your company or business doesn't offer CPR training, you can still take it from the community for free of charge, because you can use that at home, at work, anywhere you're at.
There were some items that we had heard that maybe employees should think about keeping with them, a whistle at the desk. I don't know if you want to explain why that might be, maybe a flashlight or non-perishable food and water. Obviously, those are.
If you're in a situation where your building has caught on fire, having a whistle obviously is the quickest way to identify, because you may not be able to scream or yell as loud as you can with a whistle. Having a flashlight, if you're in a high-rise type building, or any kind of a building where you're in a cubicle and you've got some structural damage, flashlight help you lead the way. If, for instance, you're at your desk, you got a good-sized desk, and something happens and you can hide under your desk, and you've got some perishables there, it may take a little bit of time for emergency help to come to you. You've got something to eat. So these little things that you could keep in your drawer that are so inexpensive could end up saving your life.
I remember during the blackout, we were actually at some point in time using our cell phone lights because it was dark. It was the middle of the afternoon, but there were no windows, so people were using their cell phone lights to try and get around. And had we had flashlights, that was the biggest thing. People were not prepared for emergencies. And even though we're talking about businesses, a lot of these plans and sitting down and coming up with emergency strategies can be applied to families as well. Your family should probably sit down and have a plan. Who's going to contact who?
Right.
Where are we going to meet? Things like that.
Communication is big.
Yeah, communication is the key. Anything else that you gentlemen would like to add in terms of?
I would just say that, for our business community, feel free for businesses to give the chamber a call, and we can certainly walk through some of these things that we've talked about today. We've prepared a checklist that does go on the City of Farmington Hills Preparedness calendar. And we're here to help. Again, like I said, we're all on the same boat.
Exactly.
Let's make sure it doesn't sink.
And we're all a community working together. And I know that, Bill, you said that folks have questions, they can feel free to call you at Daimler Chrysler. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Daimler Chrysler Services, and we want to be a good corporate citizen here in Farmington Hills. And I really welcome the opportunity to discuss one of my favorite subjects.
Yes, well, I can tell. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us.
You're welcome.
I feel like as though I've learned some things today as well, so I appreciate both of you taking the time to come. Again, thank you, and if you have questions, concerns, anything of the sort, make sure you contact R or Bill. They will be happy to serve you. Until next time, I'm Fanchen Stinger. We're urging you on behalf of the Farmington Hills Citizen Corps Council for Emergency Preparedness to, number one, make preparedness a priority in your life, in your family's life, and make sure you always check with that calendar that you've probably received to keep up with what's new, what's happening, and how to stay safe. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. you.